Hi there, it's Cassie from Worshipful Reading. I wanted to pop on here real quick and do a little, reading update, hot take about this book, The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I'm getting ready to go to a book competition. Some of my friends and I, we do this thing called Battle of the Books, which really in my area is something that you do in elementary school. But they have like an adult version of it. So there's like books you read and then you go and there's all these rounds of trivia. I think I talked about this in an earlier video, but my friends and I, we were champions the first time we did it and we were runners up the second time. So this is like our third shot to kind of see what we're going to do. I'm wearing our t-shirts, although you probably can't really see it. We're called the Rebel Raccoon Readers, and our shirts, they have little cute reading raccoons on them. You've probably maybe seen this design like on Etsy or Pinterest or something, but the shirts say, "I tried to form a gang, but it turned into a book club." So they're super cute. But this was one of the books that we had to read for the competition. One of the other ones, which is down there, but it's too far for me to reach while balancing my phone setup, was Vampires of El Norte, which I talked about, I think, in my first video. Didn't love it. It was just like too much longing and tension in it. And this one, although I did read it, and it was closed door, just not my preference, but this one, The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, I started it in October and I DNF'd it. And I talked about it, I think, in my maybe October wrap up. I DNF'd it about 50 pages in. There wasn't any necessarily like graphic or explicit content at that point. There was just some content and I wasn't really feeling into it in October. I was very much just like feeling kind of tired and burnout and looking for more like lighter books. But then I got into November and I felt like there was a shift and I was looking for more challenging reads. I've mentioned before, I'm a teacher. I teach advanced English classes, and so much of my past season has been like vetting books for students for my curriculum and like DNFing a lot of books because I'm deeming the content like not appropriate, yada yada. So I had mentioned to one of my friends and colleagues at work, it's like, I'm not a student. I want to go back and read some of the books that I DNF'd for my students because I am an adult and I can handle some of the content and challenge myself in ways that wouldn't be appropriate for my students. And obviously, right, keeping in mind, the Christian biblical framework and mindset. And now I'm rambling, but this is kind of where my mind has been at a lot, is this idea of, worshipful reading, which is what my channel is all about. But one of my students had actually sent me a link to a website that had a lot of, teenage short stories and poems and things that she thought would be cool for us to use in our class. And I found an article on it. It's a Christian website, really for writers. But it was all about, like, the title caught me, like, cleanness in books versus godliness in books. And I've been kind of really wrestling and thinking about that in the books that I read. Am I just shooting for like clean books, or am I shooting for books that are really going to grow me as a Christian? And I think there's time and place for both. Like last month, there was so much, like I was just at capacity and I wanted just like light, fluffy books. And I think those are good and beautiful and true things. But lately I've been just grappling with that idea of, do godly books have to be clean books? Which is like a hot take and maybe a very controversial question, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Do godly books have to be clean books? And that brings me back to this. Sorry, I don't really know how to edit yet, so a more seasoned booktuber might like cut out some of this, but we're just rolling with it. but God of the Woods. So I picked it back up again because I was in the mood for more of a challenging read, and I felt bad because it's quite a clunker. I felt bad that I wasn't doing my part for the book competition, although there were several books I was like, no, definitely not reading because they have, graphic sexual content, which is definitely where I draw a line. But this book, in case you don't know, or if you didn't watch my video where I DNF'd it, it's about kind of two siblings who go missing at two different times. It takes place the backdrop of a summer camp in like the 1960s and 1970s, and like with a really rich and powerful family. Man, there are about, I feel like 20 different points of view. I've never quite read a book like this, right? We're used to maybe dual timelines and different perspectives. There are so many different perspectives. And I think too, at first, that is maybe what made me put it down too. I was like, who are all these characters? And it's, just so confusing. But I'll kind of show you at the beginning of each chapter, like chapters will kind of have this setup. Hopefully you can see that. It'll say who is narrating the chapter and then how it kind of falls in the timeline of events of the missing kids. But this book has all the trigger warnings. So please, if you're interested in it, look it up. There's abuse, there's child loss, different forms of abuse, drug and alcohol addiction. I wouldn't call it a clean book. There is a language. I was very thankful though, although there is there's infidelity and there are some relationships, I didn't feel like any of the sexual content, although it's there, I didn't feel like any of that was graphic, and I didn't really feel like any of the really difficult themes that were talked about in this book were portrayed like in a graphic or just kind of a gratuitous way. So this book ended up being a 4-star for me, which I was shocked, right? Like a month ago, I was like, oh, this is awful, blah, blah, blah. This book it's sad, very sad, but it's gripping. And on the back, one of the reviewers, right, it's one of those backs that just has like reviews. I forget which one, but I think one of them called it, or maybe it was one on the inside, called it literary thriller. It doesn't really feel like a thriller to me so much until maybe the end, but yeah, it reads very much like literary fiction. We're diving really deep into characters and their trauma and their relationships and the consequences of their decisions and their brokenness. We have some little moments and hints of redemption. I would say it's a tough book to read in a lot of aspects, just with the depth of trauma and sadness and difficulties that our characters face. But that's part of the reason why I ended up really enjoying it. It just felt really real and raw and human, in the sense that life doesn't always wrap up in a nice, neat bow. And I sometimes really, I don't think enjoy is the right word, but I appreciate, maybe that's it. I think as, and particularly as a Christian, I appreciate, really getting to dive into just characters and their decision making and their brokenness and their trauma. And I don't want to turn this into a cliche, because the brokenness shows us how much they need Jesus. I mean, that's true, right? That is so, so true. But the characters in the story and just the layers of complication, I think just give you a lot to think about and to contemplate. And yes, point for the need for true redemption and identity in Christ. Absolutely. I'm not trying to, that probably sounded so bad. I'm not at all trying to downplay that, because that, of course, that's what these characters need and what they are so lacking. But I also think sometimes it's important and it's good to kind of sit in the suffering and the brokenness and to see the consequences of sin and decisions, right? To see kind of that full picture of the world, right? Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. Yeah. So I appreciated that in this book. Like I said, I wouldn't necessarily call it clean. I wouldn't recommend it to my students in a place of where they are now, but I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts. I don't think that means that it's not good or true or can be read by Christians and have some merit to it. I think this is such a good conversation. I don't think there's necessarily one answer, and I don't even necessarily mean just for this book, right? Because even everyone has their own stories and trigger warnings, right? Like some people, because of there's a lot that goes on with, parents and children and child loss and abuse. Like for some people, right, the way to most honor the Lord and guard your heart and mind would be like not to read a book like this. But I think it's a really important and nuanced discussion to have about the books that we're reading. And I'm constantly having this discussion and processing and praying about it, right? Because so much of my work that I do is putting reading in front of 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are just kind of finding their way in the world and in their faith. So often, debating what that looks like for them, but also kind of thinking what that looks like for me too. And when taking on books with more like content and mature themes is good and helpful in my faith walk, and when it's not, right? And there's not always a one size fits all or a cut and dry answer, but I just think it's important that we're asking ourselves, right? And we're not always even going by labels. I have DNF'd, there was one Christian rom-com, which I'm not going to state on here because I know like some people love it. But it made me so uncomfortable in the ways that it was just like describing this couple's relationship and just like scenes in which they were like together and kissing and all the things. And I DNF'd it. I felt so uncomfortable. And that was the book that, was labeled as like a Christian clean rom-com. And that can just be like a me thing. But I think it's so easy just to embrace something because of the label that it's like clean or Christian. And then also just reject something because of the label because it's secular. And I feel like I can fall into this, and sometimes I can set my boundaries too small, and sometimes I can set them too big of the things that I read. And it's a day by day, season by season, asking the Holy Spirit for guidance of what that looks like to fix my eyes on Him and to read things that help me to grow, but also help me to relax and enjoy life and all the things. Wow, if you are still watching at this 14-minute mark after all that rambling, God bless you and thank you. So just a lot of processing, but that's kind of just where I'm at with my reading and have kind of been in the mood for more meatier books. Yeah. So if you have a book you think I would be interested in, I am finishing up The Lines Between Us by Amy Lynn Green. Loving that. Loving the historical fiction. And after that, the first Watchman by Louise Erdich is on my radar, being that it's Native American Heritage Month. Been wanting to read that by her for a while. Yeah, so if you have any thoughts on all of these ramblings of what it means to honor the Lord with what we read, a lot of hot takes I feel like in this video. If you have any book recommendations, or let me know what you're reading now, or hey, let me know a book that maybe unpopular opinion of a book that people wouldn't necessarily think of, but a book that kind of got you to think more deeply about your faith, even if it wasn't necessarily labeled as clean or Christian fiction. Well, I'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading alongside of me, and my Christmas and Advent resources and TBR should be out soon. Thanks, guys.